I was sitting in a Monroe County courtroom in Florida watching my father across the room. Richard, 56 years old, wearing a crisp gray suit, sat beside his lawyer with this smug confidence that made my stomach turn. 15 years ago, when I was just 13, he walked out on us. No explanation, no goodbye, no child support. My mom, Margaret, raised me alone, working 3 jobs while he disappeared into thin air. Through sweat and tears, she built something beautiful, 3 small vacation rental homes in the Florida Keys. Now out of nowhere, he was claiming they belonged to him. But I had a letter in my pocket, and the judge was about to read it. Before I tell you how this played out, I would love to know, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. If you have ever dealt with family betrayal or legal battles, hit that like button. You are not alone. And subscribe, because what happened next in that courtroom? Let us just say justice has a sense of humor. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare started. It was April 2010. I remember waking up that Saturday morning, walking into the kitchen, and finding my mom sitting at the table. Her hands were shaking as she held a piece of paper. Her voice came out hoarse and broken when she said, "Your dad is gone." There was no phone number, no forwarding address, nothing. Just emptiness where a father used to be. When I checked our joint bank account later that day, the one Mom thought still had $3,000, it showed $200. He had cleaned it out. He had also taken the reliable car, leaving us with the old sedan that barely started on cold mornings. Mom called in sick to work that day, something she never did. I heard her crying softly in the bathroom, trying to muffle the sound so I would not hear. But I did. I sat in my room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the birds chirping outside, and everything felt wrong. The sunlight coming through the kitchen window felt wrong. The smell of cold coffee felt wrong. My entire world had just shifted, and I was only 13 years old. The months that followed were brutal. Mom worked as a receptionist at a dental office from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Then she would rush to the grocery store, where she worked part-time from 4 until 9 at night. On weekends, she cleaned houses for extra cash. I learned to cook basic meals after school: spaghetti, grilled cheese, scrambled eggs. I would sit at the kitchen table doing homework, listening for the sound of her car pulling into the driveway around 10 at night. She always tried to smile when she came home. She would ask about my day, help me with whatever assignment I was stuck on, and tuck me in like everything was normal. But I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. I could see the weight she was carrying. On my 14th birthday, there was no party, no guests, just a single cupcake from the grocery store bakery where she worked. She held my hand across the table and said, "We are going to be okay, sweetheart." I squeezed her hand back and made a silent promise to myself I would help her. I would not let her struggle forever. My father never called, not once. No birthday cards, no Christmas messages, no child support checks. It was like he had evaporated into thin air, leaving behind nothing but questions and hurt. When I was 15, Mom and I drove down to Key Largo to visit my grandmother. We spent an afternoon walking along the beach, feeling the warm sand beneath our feet, watching pelicans dive into the turquoise water. Mom stopped and looked out at the ocean. "One day," she said quietly, "I'm going to have a little house down here. Nothing fancy, just something small and peaceful. A place we can rent out to vacationers and maybe make a little extra income." It was not a fantasy. It was a goal. She opened a savings account the following week. Every month she would deposit $30, then $50, then whatever she could spare. I started contributing too. I mowed lawns in the neighborhood. I delivered newspapers before school. Every dollar I earned, I gave half to Mom for her Florida Keys fund. She would tear up every time I handed her cash. "You do not have to do this," she would say. But I did, because she was doing it for us, and I wanted to do it for her. By 2018, when I was 21 and had just graduated from college, Mom had saved $25,000. It had taken 8 years. 8 years of sacrifice, discipline, and hope. We found a small bungalow in Islamorada that needed work. The asking price was $90,000. It was rough paint, peeling floors, scuffed weeds overgrowing the yard, but it had good bones. Mom put down $20,000 as a down payment, and we got a mortgage for the rest. I will never forget the day we signed the closing papers. Mom's hand trembled as she held the pen. When she finished signing, she covered her face and cried. Not sad tears, happy tears, relieved tears. We drove straight to the property afterward and stood in the driveway staring at our little bungalow. "We did it," she whispered. "Cole, we actually did it." Over the next 3 months, we fixed that place up ourselves. I took time off from my new job as a software engineer to help. We painted every wall. We replaced the flooring in the living room. We planted hibiscus and palm trees in the front yard. We named it Maggie's Retreat after my mom. When we listed it on vacation rental websites, it booked within a week. The first month, we made $1,200 in rental income. Mom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You see," she said, "we can do this." 2 years later, in 2020, we bought a second house in Marathon, a 2-bedroom cottage for $130,000. We used the profits from Maggie's Retreat as the down payment. Then, in 2022, we bought a third property in Key West, a small studio for $110,000. By then, Mom had quit 2 of her 3 jobs. She managed the rentals full-time, and they brought in about $5,000 a month combined. I was 26, working remotely as a software engineer, and I helped cover expenses whenever she needed it. For the first time in over a decade, my mom smiled without the weight of exhaustion behind it. We would sit on the deck of the Marathon house during sunsets, sipping iced tea, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. "This is the life I always dreamed of," she said one evening. I squeezed her hand. "You earned it, Mom." Then, in February 2025, everything shattered. It was a Tuesday night. I was working from Mom's house in Homestead, finishing up some code for a client project. Mom was at the kitchen table scrolling through emails on her laptop. Suddenly, she went pale. Her hand froze on the mouse. "Cole," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Come here." I walked over and looked at the screen. The subject line read, "Legal notice regarding property ownership." It was from a law firm called Thornton and Associates. My stomach dropped as I read the first few lines. "On behalf of our client, Richard Cole, we hereby notify you of his rightful claim to the properties located in Islamorada, Marathon, and Key West, Florida. These properties were purchased using marital assets and therefore fall under equitable distribution laws. Our client is entitled to 60% of the total property value. Failure to comply will result in legal action." I read it again, then a third time. My hands started shaking. "How can he do this?" I said. "He left. He did not contribute a single dollar." Mom's voice cracked. "How does he even dare?" I grabbed my phone and called a family law attorney the next morning. Her name was Sarah Mitchell Sharp, 40 years old, with a reputation for handling tough cases. She reviewed the email and our financial records. Then she delivered the bad news. "Your father has a legal argument," she said carefully. "Florida is an equitable distribution state. When a marriage ends, assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally, but fairly. The problem is that your parents never formally divorced. They separated in 2010, but there is no divorce decree on file. So what? I said. He abandoned us. I know, Sarah said, but technically they are still married. And under Florida law, any property acquired during a marriage or with marital funds can be considered marital property. I felt sick. But Mom bought the first house in 2018, 8 years after he left. True. But your father's lawyer is going to argue that without a formal divorce, the marriage was still legally intact. They will also argue that even though your mom saved the money herself, the original funds in that joint account, however little, were marital assets. It is a stretch, but it is not impossible. This is insane. I agree, but we need to be prepared. Your father hired a very good attorney. This is going to court. The next 2 months were a blur. We gathered evidence bank statements, showing Mom's deposits receipts from house repairs, photos of us painting walls and fixing floors. We lined up witnesses, neighbors who saw us working on the properties, friends who knew my father had disappeared. Meanwhile, my father's lawyer, a man named Thornton, prepared his case. Thornton was 55, silver-haired, with a deep, authoritative voice. He built his argument around one thing: the technicality of the marriage. My client never formally divorced, he would say. Just under Florida law, he has rights. My father even claimed he wanted to be involved but was blocked. A complete lie. He had our phone number, our address. He chose not to call. Mom barely slept. She lost 10 pounds in 6 weeks. I stayed up late every night researching case law, trying to find something, anything that could help. The legal fees were piling up. Sarah was charging us $5,000, and that was just the beginning. One night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at nothing. I thought about my father, this man I used to call Dad. I thought about the 15 years of silence, the missed birthdays, the absence at my high school graduation, the fact that he was now trying to take the one thing my mother had built with her own hands. And then I had an idea. I need to write a letter to the judge. I told Sarah the next day. She raised an eyebrow. That is unusual. Judges do not typically accept letters from parties involved in a case. I know. But this is not a legal argument. It is the truth. I want the judge to know what really happened. Sarah thought for a moment. It is risky, but it might work. If you write something genuine, something from the heart, the judge might read it. Just do not make it sound like a legal brief. Make it personal. So I wrote. I wrote about being 13 years old and waking up to find my father gone. I wrote about watching my mom come home at 10 at night, exhausted, but still smiling. I wrote about our dream of owning a home in the Florida Keys, a symbol of hope and resilience. I wrote about painting walls and fixing floors together. I wrote about the tears in her eyes when she signed the closing papers. I wrote about 15 years of silence. No calls, no cards, nothing. And I ended it with this: Your Honor, my father wants 60% of something he never built. My mother wants to keep what she earned with her own blood, sweat, and tears. I am asking you what is fair. I sealed it in a white envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. The courtroom in Key West was small. Wood-paneled walls, a slowly rotating ceiling fan, the smell of humid wood and ocean air drifting through the cracked windows. Sunlight came through in slanted beams, casting stripes across the wooden floor. Judge Harrison entered at 9 in the morning. He was 62 years old, with a sun-weathered face and sharp, intelligent eyes. He had a reputation for being fair but strict. He sat down, adjusted his reading glasses, and glanced around the room. My father sat at the defendant's table with Thornton beside him. Richard looked polished. His gray suit was perfectly tailored. His hair was slicked back. He sat upright, confident, like he had already won. He did not look at me or my mom. Not once. Mom sat beside me wearing a simple floral dress. Her hands were trembling. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Sarah sat on her other side, calm, and focused, her notes organized in neat stacks. Thornton stood first. His voice filled the room, deep, authoritative, persuasive. Your Honor, this case is straightforward under Florida law. My client Richard Cole and the defendant Margaret Cole were never legally divorced. They separated in 2010, yes. But no divorce decree was ever filed. Under Florida Statute 61-75, assets acquired during a marriage are considered marital property. The first property was purchased in 2018, 8 years after separation. But without a formal divorce, my client technically remained married. Therefore, he has an equitable interest in these properties. Thornton continued. Furthermore, Ms. Cole used funds that originated from their joint marital account. Even though those funds were depleted in 2010, the capital source was marital in nature. We are requesting 60% equity in all 3 properties, which have a combined value of approximately $350,000. My client is entitled to $210,000. He sat down. My father leaned back slightly, a faint smile on his face. He glanced over at us, once his eyes cold, detached, as if to say, I am going to win this. My blood boiled. Sarah stood up. Her voice was calm but razor sharp. Your Honor, let us talk about what really happened here. Mr. Richard Cole did not just separate from his family. He abandoned them. He left in April 2010 with no notice, no explanation, and no forwarding address. He emptied their joint bank account, leaving Ms. Cole with $200 and a 13-year-old son to raise. He never paid a dime in child support. He never called. He never sent a birthday card. For 15 years, he was a ghost. Sarah placed a stack of bank statements on the table. Ms. Cole worked 3 jobs for 8 years. She saved every penny, $25,000. She bought the first home in 2018 with her money, her effort, her sacrifice. Mr. Cole contributed nothing, not a single dollar, not a single hour of labor. Nothing. She continued. Your Honor, Florida law does allow for equitable distribution, but equitable means fair. How is it fair for a man who abandoned his family to claim 60% of what they built? He waited 15 years to make this claim. He only filed when the property values increased. This is not about rights. This is opportunism. Sarah sat down. The room was silent except for the soft whir of the ceiling fan. Judge Harrison leaned forward. Mr. Richard Cole, please take the stand. My father stood, walked to the witness stand, and took the oath. He sat down, looking calm and composed. The judge spoke. Mr. Cole, why did you leave in 2010? Your Honor, my father said smoothly, the marriage was not working. I needed space to figure things out. Did you inform your wife you were leaving? A pause. I left a note. I almost stood up. There was no note. He was lying. Did you provide financial support for your son? Another pause. I intended to, but circumstances made it difficult. That is a no, correct. Why are you claiming these properties now? Because they are technically marital assets. I have legal rights. Judge Harrison stared at him for a long moment. My father did not flinch, but I saw a flicker of discomfort cross his face. Sarah called me to the stand next. I walked up, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. My heart was pounding. Sarah asked, "Cole, tell the court about April 2010. I took a breath. I was 13. I woke up one morning and my dad was gone. My mom told me he left. No explanation. No phone number. Nothing. Did he contact you afterward? Never. Not once in 15 years. How did your mother support you? My voice cracked. She worked 3 jobs. I watched her come home at 10 every night exhausted, but she never complained. She just kept going. Tell the court about buying the first house. My mom saved for 8 years. We bought a little place in Islamorada. We fixed it up ourselves, painting, replacing floors, planting trees. It was our dream. She cried when we signed the papers. Thornton cross-examined me. But your parents were still legally married, correct? Technically, yes. But my dad abandoned us. That does not change the law. I looked him in the eye. It should. I stepped down. My hands were shaking. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the envelope. I made a decision. Your Honor, I said, stopping halfway back to my seat. May I approach the bench? Judge Harrison looked up, surprised. What is it, son? I pulled out the envelope. It is a letter. I wrote it for you. Thornton shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Judge Harrison held up a hand. I will allow it. Sit down, Mr. Thornton. I walked up to the bench and handed the judge the white envelope. He opened it slowly and began to read. The room went completely silent. I could hear the ceiling fan. I could hear my own heartbeat. I looked over at my father. He shifted in his seat, his confidence wavering. The judge read for what felt like an eternity. Then he looked up at me. He looked at my father, and then he chuckled softly. Well, Judge Harrison said, a faint smile on his lips. This is interesting. My father's face tightened. Thornton looked annoyed. My mom squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Judge Harrison set the letter down and leaned back in his chair. I have heard both sides. I have reviewed the evidence, and I have read this letter. He paused. Mr. Thornton, your legal arguments are technically sound. Florida law does protect marital assets, but you are missing something crucial, the concept of equitable distribution. Equitable does not mean equal. It means fair. He looked directly at my father. Mr. Richard Cole, let me tell you what I see. You abandoned your family in April 2010. You left without notice. You emptied the joint account and provided zero support for 15 years. Not a phone call. Not a birthday card. Not a single dollar. This is not separation. This is desertion. He gestured to the documents in front of him. Ms. Margaret Cole worked 3 jobs. She saved every penny. She purchased these properties with her money, her effort, her sweat. You contributed nothing. He picked up my letter. This letter from young Mr. Cole. It reminds me why I became a judge. It is not just about statutes. It is about what is right. He wrote, my father wants 60% of something he never built. That sums it up perfectly. Judge Harrison's voice grew firm. Mr. Richard Cole, you may have had technical legal standing, but you have no moral standing. You walked away from your responsibilities. You cannot walk back in and claim the rewards. He picked up his gavel. The court finds in favor of the defendants. Ms. Margaret Cole and her son Cole retain full ownership of all 3 properties. Mr. Richard Cole's claim is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am ordering Mr. Cole to pay the defendants legal fees totaling $7,500. The gavel struck the bench with a sharp crack. Case closed. My mom burst into tears. She grabbed me and held on like she would never let go. Sarah smiled and patted my shoulder. My father sat frozen, staring at the judge in disbelief. Thornton gathered his papers, his jaw tight with frustration. Judge Harrison looked at me and gave a small nod as if to say, "You did good, son." My father stood and walked out without looking back. I watched him go, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt free. The weeks after the trial were strange. I kept waking up in the middle of the night, half expecting a phone call saying my father was appealing. But it never came. Slowly, the knot in my chest began to loosen. A month later, Mom and I flew down to Key West. We stood in front of Maggie's retreat, the little bungalow we had painted and fixed with our own hands. The sun was setting over the ocean. The air smelled like salt and hibiscus. Waves lapped gently against the shore. Mom turned to me, tears in her eyes, but this time they were happy tears. "Cole, we won. Not just in court, in life." I hugged her. "We did it together, Mom." We spent the evening at the Marathon House, cooking seafood pasta and drinking wine. We laughed. We talked about the future. For the first time in years, everything felt peaceful. I do not hate my father. I do not wish him harm. But I also do not need him in my life. I let go of the anger not for him, but for me. Holding on to it would have only hurt me. That letter I wrote was not just ink on paper. It was 15 years of truth. And sometimes the truth is powerful enough to change everything. My mom taught me something important. You do not need someone who left you. You need yourself, your resilience, and the people who choose to stay. Those 3 houses are not just properties. They are proof that you can build a life from nothing. They are proof that justice does exist if you are brave enough to fight for it. My dad claimed our vacation homes, but he forgot one thing: they were never his to take. And now they never will be. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who wronged you? Have you ever fought for what was rightfully yours? Drop a comment below and share your story. If this resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real-life stories about resilience and justice. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who needs to know that standing up for yourself is always worth it. Thank you for listening. I hope you find your own peace, whatever battle you are fighting. Take care and remember, you are stronger than you think.